Generation 1. Generation 1 marks the birth of the video game industry. Present video game giant Atari stepped in by launching Pong, its first video game. Pong, named after ping pong, was a basic multiplayer score-based game derived from table tennis. 6 years later, another popular game entered the market, Space Invaders, also by Atari. Space Invaders was a strategy and score-based shooter game with limited controls and mechanics. Within 2 years, Namco launched its first video game, which set out to become one of the most popular games during its time, Pac-Man. What made this game famous was its 4 non-playable characters, or as we gamers call it, NPCs. Each NPC has its own unique behavior, which could not be easily predicted. This game gave birth to artificial intelligence and is still used as an example for it. All games during this generation had negligible graphics since characters were just made out of pixels. Also, these games were very simplistic without any narrative or motive, but yet fun to play. Most importantly, these games were developed for arcade machines, so even though the game supported multiplayer, it required both players to be present at the same machine playing side by side. Generation 2. While the craze for video games went on increasing among people, Nintendo took the advantage of this situation and launched the game Donkey Kong. Donkey Kong was a platformer and puzzle-based game with one simple goal. Donkey Kong had a unique gameplay compared to the previously launched games by Nintendo, which made it stand out of the crowd. Nintendo also partnered up with third-party studios like Rare, Hudson Soft, and Hamster Corporation to develop some very interesting games with new forms of gameplay. One of them was Duck Hunt. Duck Hunt was way different from other games because it was meant to be played with a remote gun instead of a joystick. This was a major breakthrough in this industry and marked the beginning of live shooter games. Games in this generation had improved graphics, better music, sound effects, and enhanced gameplay. Although, certain drawbacks from Generation 1 still existed, since all the games developed in Generation 2 were again meant for arcade machines. Generation 3. Generation 3 began with the rise of new genres like action, adventure, strategy, puzzles, survival, and many more. It also led to new gameplay methods like open worlds, side-scrollers, PvP, or player versus player action, etc. One of the most popular games of this generation is Super Mario Bros., launched by none other than Nintendo. Super Mario Bros. Was an adventure-based side-scroller game with very minimal action and a simple goal. This game was so popular that it's played by people till this date. Nintendo launched a second super hit game shortly after the success of Super Mario Bros. Named The Legend of Zelda. It was an action-adventure open-world game with certain challenges and fun quests to complete. While it was a pretty short game, the concept was quite good at the time. A year later, Konami launched its first action shooter game, Contra. Contra was a single-player/multiplayer side-scroller game with simple mechanics but amazing gameplay. Acquiring different weapons at every stage to shoot the enemies just felt so satisfying. During the same year, Capcom rose to fame when it launched its first game, Street Fighter. Street Fighter was a player versus player or PvP fighting action game with advanced controls and action sequences. Street Fighter was the first game to have so many animations available for their characters, since each character had a unique set of moves. Even though each game that launched during this generation was unique in their own way, the one thing that's common among all of them was that all games were two-dimensional.
Generation 4. Games in Generation 4 were mostly in 2D, but this does not mean they lack depth to them. For example, Sonic was arguably one of the best side-scrolling 2D platforms of its time. Its intuitive and fast-paced gameplay combined with its spot-on sound effects made Sonic the best-selling game on the Sega CD. Wolfenstein was also a 2D game, but it made use of all 3 degrees of freedom. It introduced to the world what first-person shooting games were all about, and it is one of the best-selling games on the NES. Generation 5. Mega Man was released in the year 1996 for the Nintendo 64. It is a side-scrolling action platformer. It has similar gameplay to Sonic, but it had better graphics and animation with superior sound effects. Metal Gear Solid was released on the PlayStation 1. It was one of the very first games to make use of 3D models, which was a huge step up from 2D sprites. It introduced stealth mechanics and also gave birth to artificial intelligence in games. The release of Tomb Raider marks the beginning of the action role-playing game genre, or ARPG in short. It took advantage of multiple camera angles to depict the open world style of gameplay. Generation 6 Need for Speed was the very first true racing game which was based on street racing. It introduced the concept of modifying and upgrading the player car, which gave a sense of progression. Prince of Persia is an ARPG released on the PC. It was the first game to make use of 3D graphics. The usage of the GPU gave it better performance and allowed developers to create more complex gameplay without having to worry about the performance. World of Warcraft marked the beginning of the online gaming era. World of Warcraft connects thousands of people in an open world where players make decisions and work together to achieve a common goal. Pokemon was released on the Game Boy Advance. Players would have to play for several hours to find the item they were looking for. This promoted replayability and added value to the gameplay. Grand Theft Auto, or GTA in short, was the first true open world game where players could do anything they pleased. There was no one specific way to play or complete the game. GTA still holds the title for being one of the best open world games ever created.
With the start of 2005, Sony launched God of War, based on Greek god Kratos, and has become a flagship title for the PlayStation brand, consisting of 8 games across multiple platforms, with a ninth currently in development. It portrayed high-quality graphics at that time. From this success, many companies started investing in creating high-quality games like Batman Arkham Asylum, which attracted youth, and then Ubisoft released Assassin's Creed, which was a great hit simply because they had the best story at that time. Many companies followed in these footsteps and released various games like Call of Duty Modern Warfare by Activision, etc. Action games totally hit at that time, but a new genre of games were evolving, which was horror. This changed the entire gaming industry. With the launch of PlayStation 4 and Xbox One X, the graphics were almost realistic, thanks to Nvidia GTX 7080 Ti. With this type of advancements, the horror games took the king seat from 2010 to 2015, including The Last of Us, Dark Souls, and Witcher. Witcher was so successful that Netflix produced the show based on the game, which came out after 4 years when the game itself was released. As time advances, technology becomes obsolete. That was the case as Nvidia released GTX 2080 Ti with 3D ray tracing. Ray tracing calculates the color of pixels by tracing the path that light would take if it were to travel from the eye of the viewer through the virtual 3D scene. So the graphics were next to real, but it allowed the developers to create graphic-full games which were very heavy to run. But Sony and Microsoft released PlayStation 5 and Xbox X. Games were not limited to hardware anymore. Virtual reality kicks in, and new face recognition came, which gave birth to FIFA 21. Now movie stars were also branding the games, like Keanu Reeves for Cyberpunk, Cristiano Ronaldo for FIFA, and the gaming industry is evolving at a very fast pace, with Microsoft launching Forza Horizon in 8K. This means 8000 pixels per inch. Some honorable mentions are Red Dead Redemption 2 and Skyrim.